Well, good morning, Miramar, and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Tamara G. And don't forget, you can check us out on all of our social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at City of Miramar. That's Miramar. And we all know it's right here in Miramar. And right here with me today, we have our very special guest. His name is Paul Oster. He is America's credit repairman. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Tamara.
Listen, I know that this is going to be a major deal this coming year because of everything that's happened from last year when it comes to credit repair. Are people having more problems this year with their credit than they probably have ever had before?
Well, it's certainly not a new problem, but the complaints to the FTC and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau have gone up 50%. So they've almost doubled during the pandemic. And that's just a sign of the real impact that the pandemic is having on the average person, financially. And it's the perfect storm, right? Because the bureaus are unable to keep up with the requests when people say, hey, I don't think that's accurate. Hey, I don't think that's my account. And the bureaus simply can't keep up with it. So now you have people that have lower credit scores when they really shouldn't. And that's going to wind up costing them more money in the long run.
Wow. Okay. So I didn't even think about the mistakes that could be on someone's credit, Paul. Thank you for bringing that up. But even just to getting credit and credit repair, people were kind of on shaky financial ground in 2019, 2020 anyway. So now we're talking 2021. How is a person supposed to be able to get their credit back or to repair it when not much has changed in the last year for people?
So you only know what you know, right? So the first step to this process is always looking at what I call a real credit report. Unfortunately, you can't rely on these free consumer services like Credit Karma, Credit Sesame. You have to go to like annualcreditreport.com, annualcreditreport.com. That's the FTC's website. Before COVID, BC, I say, you could check your report once every 12 months.
Hmm.
Fortunately, under the CARES Act, we can check our reports every week at annualcreditreport.com. Now, the only caveat being is you will not get your scores, but don't worry about the scores right now. Worry about the information that's on that report, and then you have to come up with a plan. Look, if debt is your problem, right? If you want to fix your credit, you got to get out of debt. If you want to get out of debt, you also have to start with a robust household budget. And as soon as I say that, people tune out. They're like, I'm not going to do a budget. I don't even know how to do a budget. It's not that hard. I don't care if you put it on a piece of paper. You start to write things down. This is how much money comes in. This is how much money goes out. And like you're saying, things are not going to change. They might even get worse, right? In
Right.
terms of income. So the thing we have to focus on is our expenses. If you want to create a positive cash flow, you have to eliminate expenses. None of us should have any of these crazy subscriptions until we're 100% out of debt. And you know what I'm talking about. Netflix, Spotify, Hulu, all these crazy things. You say when you're month, it's only $9 a month. Amazon Music, it's $4 a month. In a household, you could have $100 a month easy going out the door for things that we don't really need, right? These are things we want. I get it. They're convenient. They're entertaining. But the fact is, until we are 100% out of revolving debt, if you have any credit card debt at all, your focus should be on getting out of that debt.
But you mentioned those things, Paul, the Netflix, the Hulu, the Spotify, the Amazon Prime, all of that. People were saying they took that and replaced it with the going out for dinner and the, going to the movies and going to
Yeah.
concerts. So, when you say you've got to stop those subscriptions, I think a lot of people realize, well, wait a minute, that was my saving grace last year. I saw all of these TV shows. I could binge
Yeah.
watch them since I was home 24/7.
Yeah, so maybe narrow it down to one or two, Really take a look at the ones that you need. There could be some duplications in there.
Hmm.
If TV is your thing, find some free uh, apps that are out there. Find the cheapest apps that are out there. And look, I didn't say this was going to be easy, right? But and I hate to use the word desperate, but desperate times call for desperate measures. And this is not a lifetime. People are always amazed when they join our program. They're amazed how quickly they can actually get out of debt. Because once you really start focusing on it, there's definitely a snowball and cascading effect that's going to help you get out of debt faster than you would really think is possible.
If you're just tuning in, we're speaking with Paul Oster. He is America's credit repairman. And I am going to be very honest in saying this, Paul. I don't know how much money is going out of my household every month. And I can't be the only one. I know the basics. I know how much, my rent is. I know how much my car note is. But everything that comes out of my house, I couldn't even tell you.
Yeah. So I tell people now, look, it's crazy, especially if you have a couple of kids involved. Our households have become like small businesses, and you have to run it like a CFO, a chief financial officer. You have to look at, again, income and expenses. You do your own profit and loss. So, how do you start to track that? Well, you actually look at your bank statement, right? Too many of us don't even look at our bank statements. Too many of us don't look at our credit card statements. We kind of browse through it. And if you're like me, right, you look for the triple digits. Anything over $100, I want to know what it is.
Right.
All the other stuff is you kind of look at with a blind eye. Well, now we're going to change the way we do that. We're going to look at each line item. You look at it on the statement and you write it down on a piece of paper. And then the question is, do I need this? Do I want it or do I need it? And it's the same thing with the bank account. You got to look in there. Fortunately, you should be using debit cards for sure, not credit cards. So you look at your debit card spending. What am I spending money on? And you'll be amazed. Again, if you're stopping every day on your way to and from work at the convenience store, I always tell people stay out of convenience stores. They're a nightmare and a trap for folks. So look at those expenses with a fine tooth comb, figure out what you want versus what you need, and then start to figure out how you're going to get out of debt.
Well, because you do have a program, and we'll be telling people how they can get more information on that. But it is about credit repair. In this year, will people even need credit repair? I mean, I think the creditors know that people are having a hard time. Some people don't have jobs. Some people are just getting back on their feet. Is credit still as important as it was, let's just say, BC before COVID?
I think it's more important than ever. The banks' interest rates are starting to creep up. Banks are starting to tighten their credit restrictions. So money is going to cost you more, and especially if you don't have excellent credit. Right now, if you hear commercials about 0% financing, 2% mortgage interest rates, unfortunately, that's reserved for people who have a 740 or above. Sometimes it's a 760, but a 740 or above is considered excellent credit. It's not easy to be a 740 FICO score. You have to make sure that what the scores that you're looking at are actual FICO scores, and it's not easy to be a 740 FICO score. So until you're a 740, you have to continue to work on your credit, paying down your debt. Look, credit card utilization ratio is the second biggest factor in your credit scores. The number one is payment history, right? And that makes sense. You pay your bills on time, you're going to have better credit. But the second biggest impact is your balances to your credit limits. It's called your utilization ratio. The credit bureaus don't care how much money you make. Income is not a factor in our credit scores. What they know is how much credit we have and how much credit we have available. How much have we used? And as soon as you go over 30% of your credit limits, your scores are going to start to come down.
Wow. So it doesn't matter if I make $100,000 or if I make $20,000 a year. It's whether it's 30% of what I make in the credit, in the credit.
In the credit. For revolving credit, it's 30% of your credit limits. So again, if you have a credit limit of $1,000, you would never want to go above $300 on your balances.
Wow. So okay, so then there's the old age old I guess question of, So do I keep all of these credit cards? I could have 5 credit cards with $2,000 each. So I have $10,000 worth of credit.
Yep.
Or I could have one credit card that only has $5,000 on it
Yeah.
and I'm okay. So which one would you suggest?
So for in terms of your credit score, it's better to have more, right? So the
Wow.
worst thing that somebody can do, the average person, the worst thing that they can do is actually closing a credit card, especially if you have a longer credit history associated with that card. The third factor in credit scoring is your credit history. That's 15%. So if the average person closes a credit card, let's say they have two cards, right?
Okay.
And they have $5,000 on both cards. It's $10,000 together. One card you've had for 15 years, the other card you just opened because you got a 20% discount. If you close that card that you've had open for 15 years, you lose those 15 years of credit history the day you close the card. So now when they calculate your credit history, you only have one card and it's only been open for 2 years. So you've just significantly shortened the average length of your credit history. And you've now also lost whatever available credit you had on that card. So if you were close to that utilization ratio, closing that other card, you just took a hit to 45% of the scoring factors. Your score could easily drop 50 points, maybe 100 points.
Wow, Paul, that is amazing because most people would immediately think, okay,
Yep.
I've got to get out of debt. I've got to, get this card paid down to zero and then I'm going to shut it off so that I won't ever have it. I won't be going into Macy's, anytime soon to buy a new dress because I'm going to get it down to zero and then I'm going to shut it off. And now hearing you talk, you're saying, no, keep that card, particularly if it's a Macy's card I've had for 20 years, keep that, just don't use it. Don't
Yeah.
be tempted to
So
use it.
yeah. So not using credit, it doesn't help your credit. Paying things off early. People often make mistakes. I mentioned we did the home buying seminar
Mhm.
for some folks in Miami on Saturday. A lot of the attendees thought before they're going to apply for the mortgage, they only have 3 car payments left. They're gonna pay it off early. They only have a couple payments left on this. You get no credit for paying things off early. So make
Wow.
sure.
Uh-huh.
Sorry.
It's okay. Somebody's
Make
calling you
sure,
wanting their credit done.
yeah, make sure that you do not do that. So the FICO score is actually built on the monthly activity, especially the payment activity. So keep them open, keep them
Okay.
active, but keep those balances well below 30%. The FICO scoring model actually has a designation of a high achiever, and that's for folks that keep those balances below 10%.
If you're just tuning in, he's known as America's credit repair man. He is Paul Oster. And Paul, I wanted to ask this question about the three main bureaus because people are always concerned about well, here's the question. Why are all three of them different? Like literally, I could have a 720 on TransUnion, and then I can have a 625 on Equifax, and then I can have a 675 on Experian.
So there's a couple different reasons. One, the bureaus are terrible at maintaining and updating our information. They're not government agencies, by the way. Let's start with that. TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian, they're not government bureaus. They call themselves bureaus. They wanted people to think that they were government bureaus, but they're not. They have no government authority at all. They're simply data repositories. And they collect the data, they update it, but they do a terrible job. So they're independent. They don't like one another. They don't
Right.
speak to one another. So you could have completely different information from one bureau to the next. And the second reason is not all creditors report to all three bureaus. In order to report to the bureaus, if you want that privilege as a bank or a finance company, you have to pay the credit bureaus for the right to report your information. So the smaller banks and creditors say, I only want to report to one, maybe two. I'm not going to pay to report to all three.
And that is the reason why everything you've said, literally, people's credit scores can be from the good, good, good to the low, 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 and totally
100
different.
points. You could have 100 point difference between Experian and TransUnion, an
Wow.
easy 100 point difference.
Wow. And
That's
so,
also why they do use the mid score, especially in mortgages. Not some banks only focus on one bureau if they're looking to underwrite financing. Like the auto industry loves the TransUnion score. Most of the time, if you're going to buy a car, first of all, the FICO score is an auto FICO score.
mhm,
So, not to really blow everybody's mind, but if you applied for a mortgage and you went to buy a car in the same day, your TransUnion scores could be completely different because one is a mortgage score, one is an auto score. Um, so you got to be careful with that also. But it can go on and on and on. The differences between the bureaus and the differences between um, the industries. But
mhm.
that's why I always tell people don't get sucked down the rabbit hole about your scores. First of all, they change every month depending upon the new information. So just keep focusing on the information that's on those reports.
And speaking of that information, again, for credit repair in 2021, um, are people given grace periods now? Or are we finding that the three bureaus are maybe being a little bit more lenient, or maybe people's creditors are being more lenient because of what we're going through?
Yeah. So the bureaus have done nothing, right? And
Yeah.
they're not really geared to do nothing. What happens is the creditors, most creditors offered a forbearance or a deferment. And I should just point out the huge difference between the two. Typically, a forbearance is a finite period of time where you're allowed to skip some payments, 3 months, 6 months. But at the end of the forbearance period, all of those payments are due. In a deferment situation, same thing, it's a finite period of time, but at the end of the deferment, those payments are simply put onto the back of the loan. So there's a big difference there.
Okay, absolutely. And so, if people wanted more information about the program that you run, that you will help people to get their credit repair back into where it needs to be, how can they find out that information?
So we always tell people again, start with the do-it-yourself mindset. Get some things in order, and then if you have to hire a credit repair organization, you know, make sure you understand how it works, right? Because unfortunately, there's lots of scams that are still out there. But we've made it really easy for folks to at least start the process and come up with a plan, and then you see if you're going to need help to hire a professional. So all you're going to do is send a text message to the number 40691. That number is 40691. And your message is going to be relief. And when you text in 40691, your message is relief. I will send you one text and one text only. And that is a link to our credit and COVID survival guide. It's all the resources that you would need. All the questions can get answered by going to that survival guide. And then if you need to take the next step, we'll help you do that. If you need to take the next step, we'll certainly help you do that. But like with everything, Tamara, the first step is the hardest always. So take
Absolutely.
the first step now. What I fear the most is people are waiting until we're actually completely out of the pandemic, and then they're going to start this process. I tell people every single day, the best day to focus on your credit was yesterday. The next best day is today. So
Mhm.
do something about it today. Don't wait until tomorrow, and at least start the process. Have a plan in place. Have some options, especially with the debt situation. It's a tremendous relief. We hear we hear the moment that people, at least if they have a plan. Now, that plan may say you can get out of debt in 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, but at least you have a plan.
Right.
If you don't have a plan, it's kind of you're just stuck in the mud. You're in this crisis mode all of the time. Put a
But
plan
I
together and then execute it.
and I was going to say, Paul, I think that is always the issue, is that people just feel like this is just so overwhelming. This is, they've dug themselves into a hole, or maybe they're not. Maybe they're just barely staying above water. Like, And it's just too, with everything else that's going on, people losing loved ones, people losing jobs. Your whole life has changed. You're all working from home, and you all you hate being with each other 24/7.
Yeah.
Just your whole lives have changed. This just seems like it's one more thing to add to the list, and therefore
Listen,
it's just overwhelming. You want to cry when you think about it.
uh, unfortunately, it's worse than that. I actually had a conversation with a woman today. She's in Florida, Sarasota, and she mentioned that it was only a couple of months ago she was considering taking her life.
Oh
She
no.
couldn't get approved for the PPP loan, the EIDL loan. Her business is collapsing. The rent is due on her building. The rent is due at her home. And so in just a quick conversation, and she didn't realize this, because what happens is when you're that overwhelmed, you tune everything out. People go into bunker mode. They stop listening. They don't answer the mail. They don't open the mail. They don't answer the phone. Forget about answering the door.
Right.
But she didn't realize that the guidelines for the PPP loan have changed. So
Yes.
she's a sole proprietor, 1099 business owner. I said, listen, you can now apply. I know you thought you weren't eligible for the first round, but they changed the guidelines. You should have heard the sigh of relief from this woman's voice.
Wow.
So it is overwhelming. I get that. But you don't go to jail. There is no debtor prisons. Look, the worst case scenario, if you're really in debt, insurmountable debt, you're never going to get out of debt unless you win the lottery.
Hmm.
There's bankruptcy laws in place that help us. And believe it or not, the fastest way out of debt, if you get approved, uh, is bankruptcy. Whether it's a Chapter 7, completely debt free, or a Chapter 13, where the courts are going to determine you have to pay back a certain percentage of the debt to the creditors. But within 12 to 24 months,
Hmm.
it's like ServPro. It's like it never happened. You could be in the 700 credit club. You could be getting offers. You could get a mortgage. You could go do it like it never happened. 12 to 24 months is a blink of an eye. So,
Especially in this time, it just happens
yeah.
so fast.
So if you're struggling with debt, listen, there's lots of options out there. Again, let's figure out what options are best for you, figure out the plan, and then you decide, hey, I'm going to go it alone, or I'm going to hire some professionals to do that. And again, you'll get those resources if you send that text message to the number 40691, and your message is simply relief.
All right, and that's RELIEF for those people who are out there. Again, the text is 40691, and you just text the word relief, and Paul is going to send you back some information. He says he'll only send you a text once, so you won't keep getting those unwanted text messages. You don't have to
Yeah.
block him. He's here to help you. So again, Paul Oster, America's Credit Repairman, thank you so much for being with us today. One last question before we go. Is it better to have credit or pay everything in cash? Because I know some people who've been paying in cash for years.
So unfortunately, again, the FICO scoring model is built on the ability to manage debt. You have to demonstrate the fact that you can do it. Now, people will say, "Well, Paul, if I'm paying everything in cash, isn't it obvious that I'm managing my finances? I don't need credit." But that's not how the FICO scoring model works. So unfortunately, if you need to add a secured credit card, if you need to build your credit, do it now. It takes a minimum of 6 months. You have to have two open active accounts for a minimum of 6 months to get on the FICO score radar. So, and you don't come out of the gates at a 700. You're going to start off, in the low sixes, and then you have to build from there. Time and activity will help you do that. But unfortunately, using a debit card or cash, although that's awesome from a financial planning standpoint, it's terrible when it comes to building your credit.
And there's the final word. Paul Oster, America's Credit Repairman. Again, that text message is 40691. That's the number you need to go to, 40691. In your text, just text that and then put the word relief in, RELIEF. And Paul will send you back a message with lots of resources on taking that first step, which, as he mentioned, is always the hardest step to try to work on credit repair for this year after everything that has happened with everybody. And I don't know many people that are out here who have not had a challenge with their credit in this last year for many different reasons. So don't feel like you're alone, right, Paul?
No, I'm not one of those people. I'm part of, I'm in it with everybody else. Look, our business, took a hit like everybody, and things were hard enough again, BC before COVID. They've just gotten harder. But you gotta stay in there. You gotta have faith and just know that things will, ultimately get back to normal. And when they do, again, you want to have that plan in place long before that happens.
Sounds good. All right. Text the word relief, RELIEF, to 40691. 40691. Paul Oster will be giving you some resources, some information to work on your credit repair for this year. Thank you, America's Credit Repair Man, Paul Oster. We really appreciate you being with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on. Have a great day.
You too.